Here's another question, Dr. Craig. He says, Dr. Craig, I was not born a Westerner, so in my journey toward faith in Jesus Christ, the intellectual obstacles were mainly of a culturally chauvinistic or racialistic nature. And yet, by the grace of God, I've resolved these questions to my own satisfaction. And Bill, in a nutshell, he's saying that how do you answer the charge that Christianity is just a white man's or has become a white man's religion?
I would say that anyone who is aware of the demographics of Christianity today and its growth will see that that impression is just completely mistaken. In fact, Christianity is not a white man's religion. In 1989, the number of Christians in Asia exceeded the number of Christians in North America. And by 1991, the number of Christians in Asia exceeded the number of Christians in the entire Western world. So, if anything, Christianity is today an Oriental religion. It is primarily Asian. It's Chinese, Korean, Indonesian, and Indian. And it turns out that the Caucasian branch of Christendom will be merely the initial segment that God used in Western Europe to spawn the worldwide missionary movement that carried the gospel throughout the world. And that in the end, it will be just a tiny fragment of Christendom that is Caucasian. The overwhelming majority of Christians today are black and Oriental.
Bill, do you have any insight as to whether Christianity really is declining in the Western world?
My understanding of the demographics is that in the West, the growth rates of Christianity, or at least evangelical Christianity, are basically flat. We're not losing, we're holding our own. There is a slight increase in the United States, praise the Lord, but in the Western world in general, because of the precipitous declines in Western Europe, Christianity is basically flatlining it in the Western world. It is in the third world, in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, that Christianity is growing at well over twice the growth of in the world's population. It is far outstripping the increase in the world's population in these non-Western countries, and so is becoming increasingly non-Western and non-Caucasian in its nature.
Brings up a question about American evangelicalism and America's attitudes toward religion in general. Seems like there is kind of what I call an adolescent rebellion that took place in the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And that is, we can't have that stagio religion from our parents and grandparents. We need to look for insight into other options. And an embrace of the East in Eastern mysticism began. And it's
That
almost,
certainly did begin, didn't it?
yeah,
In the 60s.
and pop culture and it led to the New Age movement,
Yeah.
which is kind of an embrace of Eastern mysticism and so on. Pop culture kind of played up on that as being the rebellious black sheep of the family by saying, if you really want to get insight, then you need to go to the Oriental man down the street, the Karate Kid and so forth, because they hold to the path of life. And your old grandpa down, a deacon at the church, he doesn't know much, So perhaps that has also led to a notion that Christianity is a stagio white man's religion when nothing could be further from the truth, and it certainly didn't start that way.
No, and well, that's a good point. It didn't start that way. I mean, we need to understand that Christianity is birthed out of Judaism, and it is a Middle Eastern religion which spread throughout the world, really, into China and into North Africa, as well as into Europe. But it was in Europe that, of course, Western civilization flourished and then had the financial resources for carrying the gospel to the rest of the world. And today, if you visit China, for example, as I have with the Society of Christian Philosophers, it is remarkable what Chinese academics themselves are saying. As part of the outreach of the Society of Christian Philosophers, we've been meeting jointly with professors of philosophy at top universities in China and talking about philosophical issues. And what has stunned us is to hear the Chinese academics themselves saying to us that China needs a new philosophical foundation for its morality and for its culture if it's to go forward into the 21st century. At the last conference I was at Fudan University in Shanghai, one of the Chinese philosophers says Confucianism is basically dead. It cannot be revived. He said there is no other religion other than Christianity which has a chance of serving as a foundation for the moral fabric of Chinese society. And he said what we need to recognize today is that Christianity is not a foreign religion. He said Christianity in China is a flourishing, indigenous Chinese religion, and we need to embrace it as such. Well, we were just blown away by this sort of admission on the part of this Chinese academic and this embrace of Christianity as an indigenous Chinese faith.
Wow. Bottom line is, Christ came for everyone.
Yes, and before the throne, it says in the book of Revelation, there will be people from every tongue and tribe and nation and people giving praise to the Lamb and to God.